There we go.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. How's everyone doing?
Good, how are you?
Wonderful.
All right, so we'll go ahead and introduce you and then I guess we can get started. I'm Katie Diebold, I'm one of the tech coaches.
And I'm Jill Heaton, another tech coach here at York.
Great, nice to meet you.
And this is Andrew Marcinek. He is the former Chief Open Education Advisor for the Office of EdTech in the Department of Ed. And I believe, Andrew, you work in Boston, Massachusetts now?
Yeah, I reside in Boston, Massachusetts, and I'm the current CIO for Worcester Academy in Worcester, Massachusetts.
Okay, awesome. We're really excited to have you here today. We've been talking about curating resources all week, talking about intro to open ed. Today, after you leave us, they're going to be creating some of their own resources. So that's kind of a preview for the week.
Awesome. Well, I'm ready to get started if you guys are, or any more introductions, or?
I think we're going to get started. Do you want to kind of give them a brief overview of open ed resources, kind of how it got started, where everything is at right now?
Yeah, sure, that'd be great. I'll kind of give you some context for what I've been working on the past year with the Office of Educational Technology through the U.S. Department of Education. And essentially, a lot of my work and actually my position, which had not existed before at the Department of Education, was essentially born out of the President's Connect Ed plan, which he talked about 3 years ago. And we remember the famous quote where he talked about the idea of access and equity. And a lot of the Connect Ed plan is around access and equity. And a lot of the work I've been doing is around access and equity of not only connectivity and devices and quality professional learning for educators, but high quality open educational resources is some of the work I've been doing. And so when the president made that famous quote where he says, in a country where we demand Wi-Fi with our coffee every morning, we definitely should demand it in our schools. And so since then, I've always said, like, we always kind of come to the idea that Wi-Fi is now kind of this expectation. Connectivity is this expectation. And if you've ever taken a moment and just like not connected yourself or you couldn't access it, try and do that for maybe 2 hours without your hand shaking. And, or you go to a conference and the Wi-Fi's down, or you go to, I was actually on a flight a few months ago, and the pilot came on in the beginning and said the Wi-Fi was not going to be accessible through the duration of the 3-hour flight. And all you heard were groans going up and down the aisle. And I said, what kind of society do we live in? And what's happened to us all? There are books. But what was interesting was the idea of there are kids out there today that don't have access to that's their everyday reality, that access to whether it's Wi-Fi, whether it's connectivity, whether it's actually a book. So a lot of the things we think about is access and equity around resources and around educational materials. I always kind of start with saying, think about how many students out there learned from a textbook this year that still has Pluto as a planet, or still had George W. Bush as the current president. I'm all for Pluto being back in the planet, in the planet and solar system. I really hope it makes a comeback. But at this point, there are kids out there sharing books, or they just don't have access. And then that's what, a lot of the work we've been doing that focused around Connect Ed. And Connect Ed led into another initiative that came out of the Office of EdTech, which was Future Ready. So we now have Future Ready schools, Future Ready leaders. We have Future Ready librarians, which is just recently launched and was announced at ISTE. So if are there any librarians in the room? Awesome. So I'm speaking to your amazing skill set of curation and discovery. So we'll talk a little bit about how awesome librarians are and how extremely important they are in this day and age where information is so abundant and so vast, and using the skills of curation and discovery that librarians are skilled in to really help drive and support a lot of the work around open educational resources. So I'll kind of get into what I've been doing. And so last September, I got a chance to work with Secretary Duncan on his bus tour, back to school bus tour, where we visited a school in Williamsfield, Illinois. And I'll tell you a little bit about Williamsfield, Illinois. You probably never heard of it. Has anyone ever heard of it? Okay.
I'm from Central Illinois. Yeah. So.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah.
That's great. So Williamsfield is a small little town outside of Peoria, Illinois, and I think the town's population is about 600, and the student population is about 99 last time I checked, K through 12, which is kind of crazy. But what they were doing out in Williamsfield, Illinois was really exciting because I discovered them through a woman named Jeannie Kitchens, who works on the Illinois Shared Learning Environment, which is a great resource I'll talk about in a little bit. But what they were doing was they came to a point where they had to purchase a new math curriculum, and they found out that they didn't have a really big budget for purchasing new curricula. So what they did was they looked around and they said, let's think about doing this differently. So they connected with a community college, Carl Sandburg Community College, and they got some resources from their math teachers and math professors. They looked to the Dana Center, which is out of Texas, for a scope and sequence. They looked to the Engage New York curriculum, which is an openly licensed educational resource out of New York, which is a K-12, K through 12 math curriculum that is all openly licensed and available to use for anyone. And they also looked to resources like Khan Academy. And what they did was they took those dollars that they were going to spend on those textbooks, and they literally reinvested in the teachers that were sitting in front of them. And that's a lot of what we're talking about is with open educational resources, is not so much in, now that if we're taking textbooks away, our teachers are now going to have to be curators, editors, publishers, and distributors of resources. And that's not the case. That's what a lot of companies out there, I'll refrain from naming any of them, although now I can since I'm not in the department anymore, which is fun. And so, but the big textbook companies that don't want you to hear this stuff, they want you to think that it's going to be a grind for teachers. And essentially, it's not. And we look to what's happening in the coding community with something like GitHub, where coders are actually sharing their resources, sharing their code in order to drive innovation and to drive a better understanding of how you can create better applications, better resources, and really help support and solve problems. So that's kind of essentially what we're thinking about here. So what Williamsfield was able to do was provide resources and compensation for their teachers, so they could begin curating resources, building these resources, and then teaching them ways in which they could distribute them in classes, shifting to different paradigms like project-based learning or competency-based learning, using a lot of flip learning methodologies. So that was a way in which they were now not having to just have this textbook guide them. They weren't giving their teachers a script every year and saying, start on page 1 and I'll see you on page 181 when the year ends. They were saying resources are evolving, content is evolving, information changes periodically. No matter what subject you're in, it changes and it evolves. Because the world outside where our kids are going is constantly changing. It's not slowing down. It's not staying on version 1.0. And so we have to think about our resources as almost constantly being in beta, and almost as our ideas as teachers constantly being in beta. That our resources that we're using should never just be done and never be rubber stamped into the next year. We should constantly be reflecting and evaluating them as educators, as groups, as teams, as departments, so on and so forth. So that's what Williamsfield did. And so out of Williamsfield, when the secretary was there, the other thing they were able to invest in was the technology that they were able to bring into the classrooms as a result of freeing up some of this money. So they were able to shift some of those funds into technology to support students in the classrooms. In October of last year, we launched Go Open, which if you've seen it on anywhere other than Twitter, it may just look like gooping, and it may sound like a funny word, and it may what are those bureaucrats saying down there now? They're just making stuff up. So essentially what Go Open is we were looking to really get districts to replace at least one static traditional textbook within a 12-year period, a 12-month period. And so what we were talking to districts to do, a lot of district leaders, instructional leaders within a school district, is to find teachers or to find a department that was either already doing something like this or maybe excited about this, where you typically early adopters within the school district, and just to think through how they were going to strategize around this. So a lot of it was around strategizing how they were going to develop these resources, how they were going to curate them, how they were going to vet them for high quality, which is a big thing. We'll talk about some, I think you've all been introduced to the Achieve rubric, and I'll share some more examples and resources of districts out there that are creating their own resources for evaluation and of these resources and looking at them every year. Putting all the resources that they use under an annual review process, which is pretty exciting to see. And this is all organically done within a district. And so currently, so we were at the White House in October, where we officially formally launched Go Open. We had 10 districts at the time there on board, the first 10 districts across the country that raised their hand and said, we're going to replace the textbook, we're moving in this direction. We also had 5 districts there that were, they had already done this to some scale. They had replaced some resources. They had replaced textbooks. We were calling these districts Go Open Ambassador districts because these were going to be the support mechanism. These were going to be the proof points that were out there. We also had folks from Amazon and Microsoft and Edmodo and Google and Creative Commons and ASCD in the room. And all of these folks were making commitments to Go Open. So some of you may have heard that Amazon recently announced their Amazon Inspire platform. And Amazon is really committed to keeping their platform, keeping the resources in their platform open and free throughout its entirety of their work. Edmodo, most of you have already probably experienced Edmodo either through their LMS platform or through their community, their teacher community, but they have Edmodo Spotlight, which is sharing resources and having openly licensed educational resources. Microsoft is working to build some LTI components that will help really help with interoperability with LMS platforms. So a lot of these companies now are seeing the value and seeing the support they can use for supporting open educational resources. So that was very exciting and something we wanted to make sure we got on board because in my previous work, 6 years ago when I was working at a school that just launched a one-to-one iPad initiative, our superintendent said, I don't want to buy textbooks anymore. And we said, okay, we'll try and figure out how to do that. And a couple of things we ran into, a couple roadblocks, were the idea of curation. How many of you have gone out and searched for a resource based on a Common Core standard or standard you're teaching at this point and done a Google search on that? And that's really, really hard to do because Google was not meant to curate resources based on different standards for education. It was a completely different algorithm built altogether. And the technology was there to make sure these resources were able to. We got somebody else joining us from.
Yeah, that's Stan.
Oh, okay. You're in the middle of the field. Oh, there he is. Yeah. Now that's the way to do PD right there. You just got to go last night, and yeah, he's got it down. So infrastructure was a big part we wanted to focus on. We also wanted to make sure and to support guidance. We just can't be telling teachers and telling school districts that open educational resources are great for equity and access because the first thing they're gonna want to know is, how do we do this? How do we get it done? Where do we start? Where do we start with? What are other districts doing? So and I'm going to share this resource with you in a little while. One of the last things I worked on at the department was the guidance for this movement, and so it's right now it's called the Go Open District Launch Packet. So it was meant to be picked up by instructional leaders, teachers, superintendents, that they could read through this. And essentially, it's built around an outline that we collectively crowdsourced from a lot of our Go Open districts, and is filled with examples and crosswalks to what districts are doing across the country. It's full of resources, it's full of contacts, and it's a great way to kind of jumpstart your Go Open process. And then finally, we needed proof points. So we needed the Go Open ambassador district. So we needed somewhere some school districts to point to. So that's where Williamsfield comes in. That's where Tullahoma City Schools, Bristol, Tennessee Schools, City Schools, Vista Unified School District, Mentor School District in Ohio. So districts around the country that are already doing this type of work and really engaged in this process. So those are the three things we did with Go Open. At this point, we have 64 Go Open districts across the country. In February, we were at Skywalker Ranch at Big Rock for our Go Open Exchange, which was essentially a workshop and a culmination of a lot of great ideas coming together. And so that was and at that event, we launched Go Open States. So currently we have 14 Go Open states across the country. And so Go Open states are state leaders and state chiefs recognizing that districts in their state are doing this type of work. So we're getting state leaders at different education departments to participate in a community of practice, to develop strategies, to develop plans for supporting open educational resources, whether it's a review state or a local control. We have both. So having the states involved really start to push the lever in a good direction, because you have the state leadership along with the district leadership collaborating and collaborating across district and state lines. It really opens up the opportunity for a real shared culture of resources where we're not just putting more work on the teacher's plate. We're actually creating more efficient routes to access open educational resources for districts. We're pulling the burdens of high cost of textbooks and kits and assessment tools for districts and putting it in the hands of those who are actually working with it every day. We're having the teachers and the teams and the district teams support and understand and really understand the resources that they're bringing to their students every day. And so that's essentially the hallmark of Go Open and what it's been doing. My position, just so you know, it didn't just end. It was a fellowship, so we brought someone else on. I don't know if anyone knows Christina Peters. She was announced in, I think, early April as my successor for next Go Open Fellow, or Open Education Fellow. So she's continuing this work, and it'll continue through the end of the administration. And right now, we're like Future Ready. We're going to be moving Go Open outside of the department, so that when the administrations change in January, Go Open will continue to live on and continue to be supported throughout. So that's essentially an overview of Go Open and the work I did at the department. I kind of would like to maybe ask you guys some questions, or maybe see some questions that you may have, rather than, because I feel like sometimes I'm just talking at people, and I like more of a conversation type of professional development, because you know, it just sounds better when we can all talk. So if there are any questions, and then what I can do is I can share some of the resources that I mentioned in the brief talk I gave.
Yeah, that'd be great. We have a little collection of questions that we collected from our teachers this morning. A couple that maybe you touched on a little. One of our teachers, Joe, said, "What do you think publishers like Pearson and Holt will counter the OER movement? Will they just simply disappear or try to join the revolution?"
Well, they started by throwing bricks at my house. But aside from that, no, all kidding aside, in our work, we reached out to every one of the big education publishers. We wanted to bring them to the table and said, hey, we're not trying to wage a war against you and your business models. We're trying to bring you to the table to figure out more cost-effective, higher quality ways in which we can support educational materials, so that school districts can, really have some more local control, and also have a combination of paid and free resources working within that system. This is not an either or, movement or decision. We really feel that and we support, paid resources that cost annual fees or license fees. We support those. We feel like those have a place in schools, and a lot of those resources work really well. But when you look at what's changed in the scope of a classroom in the past just 5 years, even looking back 10 years, the one thing that's remained the same throughout education has been that textbook. The idea of a textbook has stayed the same. It hasn't really shifted. The music industry has had its disruptors. The movie industry has its disruptors. The publishing industry is kind of hung on because they're smart. They know their business model, and they've hung on to those things. So we're not trying to push them away, but we're already starting to see companies like McGraw-Hill making changes, making shifts towards shifting their whole philosophy and mindset. When I talked to McGraw-Hill about a few months ago, they said we're no longer a publisher. We don't see ourselves as a publishing company anymore. We see ourselves as a learning science company. And that's a really smart way of thinking of what these companies can do. So, and the other thing we talked to them about is that there is a business model out there waiting to happen around open educational resources. It can happen. It can happen through professional development. It can happen through support for districts. And so that's going to come. The analytics and the artificial intelligence around giving educators better data on the resources that are being used. And we're starting to see pilots of that happening at higher education. Just recently there were 38 community colleges offered a Z degree opportunity for students, which means that a student can go through a 4-year community college program and not pay one dime for textbooks. Where when you look at what textbook costs in a 4-year community college program, it's about a quarter of the tuition. Overall tuition is paid just on textbooks. And if you have any, know people or know kids in college at this point, what they pay, and then they sell it back for pizza money. And so that's just not a sustainable model. And the research is out there where students are underperforming or not taking classes or not finishing their degree because they won't buy the textbooks. They don't have access to the resources, or they're just copying like a page or two out of someone else's textbook. I was at Champlain College about a couple weeks ago or months ago, and I was standing behind a student who was having this moral dilemma at the cash register, whether he had to rent the textbooks or buy the textbooks, and comparing the costs and literally looking in his wallet. And I wanted to tap him on the shoulder and be like, it's okay, we're really working hard, I promise, we're gonna help you. And so again, it goes back to access and equity and really giving every kid, no matter the zip code, the same educational experience, and trying to do our best to support that. Open educational resources is just one part of that. And then also, really the voice of the educators in the classroom, and having autonomy and local control over the resources that you can select. So we hope publishing companies shift their models, shift their thinking, and sustain for a really long time.
The next question is from Lindsay. She asks, what still needs to happen, or what are the next steps to allow for more open ed resources to be available to teachers?
Yeah, that's a great question. So my thing is, I feel like we're in a very early 1.0 phase of this, and what needs to happen is more sharing. Teachers really sharing resources and sharing them openly, that there's no paywall in the way, that there's no limitations of copyright, and school districts supporting that, and school districts sharing resources. I know every school district has different policies and different contractual obligations around intellectual property and resources created on district time. But we want to see more sharing, because the more sharing we have within school districts, and the more sharing globally, the more resources that are out there. Not only that, but what also is tied into that is the data points and the evaluation of these resources and the reviews of these resources. So, I mean, I don't know about everyone else, but when I go to a new city and I want to find a restaurant, I look at Yelp and I look at the reviews. I look at what people say. I don't read too deeply into them because some of them are just outrageous. But I really kind of look at what people are saying, and that's how that guides me. And so, imagine that same concept for education and educational resources. Imagine a group of your peers out there reviewing courses that they taught over the past year, and then sharing those openly. Think about how great that can be for everyone. Here's a unit I created, and here's an assessment that worked really well for my ELL class, and these kids actually grew. Their literacy improved over this amount of time. If we have those data points, that's something we can really do great things with, while saving money, reinvesting in professional development around this for teachers. So I think those are the two things I would say are primarily around more sharing and being able to have a better metric and a better system for evaluating. The other thing I'll say about sharing too is sharing can be hard, and I totally get this. Sharing in a time where we're also, I think some people think of sharing as a risk, or that their work is going to be criticized, or their work is going to be seen by parents, or their work is going to be used against them in their evaluation. And I hope that district leaders can start to see that this is a good thing and that they should be supporting teachers in doing this, because we don't want teachers to be fearful of sharing, but actually share more and be able to also benefit from that sharing by acquiring resources and accessing resources from other districts and other teachers.
Sure. Yeah, and I think another thing that holds teachers back is feeling like their stuff isn't done yet, right? As teachers, we're always iterating and thinking, it'll be better next year. So at what point do you share? And then what would you recommend as, if I wanted to share my stuff, what is the current Yelp or open ed resources? Where do you recommend that teachers go to find stuff and share stuff?
Yeah. So, my thing has always been from when I started teaching, I was an English teacher in the school district of Philadelphia for about eight or 9 years. And I would just use a blog. I would create resources. I would share my resources, and that whole idea about sharing, not being done and us all being really, meticulous artists, in which we are. And my thing is, I would always say, here's something I created. I don't know if it's done yet, but make it better. Steal it, borrow it, make it better, and then share it back with other people. Because it kind of goes back to that idea of GitHub. I just wrote this really great code. I don't really know if it has potential yet, but maybe you can have a different lens on it and make it better, and then we could, collaborate. I'll also share an example where this is happening in 3 school districts across the country: in Vista Unified School District, Kettle Moraine School District in Wisconsin, and Mentor School District in Ohio. These 3 superintendents actually had just the random chance of sitting together at a part of the League of Innovative Schools, and they were looking to create a cross-disciplinary course, and they realized that there weren't resources out there to support this course. And so what the superintendents did was they got their teachers together. They created what was called the COW project, C-O-W, for California, Ohio, and Wisconsin. It has nothing to do with dairy. And so they created this COW project where the teachers were collaborating through a medium which we're using right now in Google Hangouts, and building collective resources through Google Docs and Google Share folders. They also spent one time a year where they would actually fly to one of their respective school districts and go do an entire day where they collaborated, they built resources, they had a lot of face-to-face time, and they're doing some great stuff, and they own these resources. They can continually update them. Their versions are constant. So it's a really great way of sharing. So those are kind of the very basic ideas. You have schools that are using something like an LMS. So we have school districts that are using Schoology, Canvas. Canvas also is Canvas Instructure is also supporting Canvas Commons, which is an OER curation tool that is built within the Canvas platform. OER Commons is a great place to find resources and to share resources. Amazon Inspire, right now it's still in private beta, but they're working on that and working the kinks out, and hopefully that'll be live soon. And that's pretty much I would say those are the places where at this point I think are good places for not only finding resources but also ways to share your resources as well.
Thank you.
The only other question I think that we maybe haven't addressed is, Vina asked, in your opinion, what would be the best way for teachers to explain open ed resources to students and parents, I guess?
Wow, that's a great one. So explaining it to students is interesting because I kind of feel like to some of the students that they're kind of already there, and we actually have some districts that are using student voice to actually build resources within the class. Having having a really inquiry-driven classroom where students are more focused on questioning than just finding answers to things. And so that's one way. For parents, it's different. It's tough, and I attribute it a lot to what I had to do when I was explaining to parents how students could actually do research on an iPad. And one of the things was always very difficult, and how they could do it without a keyboard. The one thing I find more and more about students is that they're resourceful and they figure out a way to do it. There's just been a massive trend going on in the past week or two that I don't know about anyone else, but I can't stand hearing any more about it, is this Pokemon thing. And I don't think any of the kids out there playing it ever really took a course on it. I always said in the presentations I do, whoever taught kids how to text, they didn't take a course on texting, at least I don't think so. But I think a lot of our kids are resourceful around technology because they're not afraid. They jump right in. The elementary and middle school students are not afraid. High school students, secondary students, they have a little more hesitations because the pressures of college and everything become more and more prevalent. But you know, the best place to kind of get these kids understanding of these resources and technology is in the middle and elementary levels. But for parents, what I would always do with technology is I would basically run parent technology nights once a month, twice a month, and it would be open to the whole public. And I would teach them about the applications that we're using in the classroom, so that when their sons or daughters comes home and says, like, Mom, I can't find my paper. It's in Notability, but I don't know if I backed it up to the cloud. And so now the parent's role has gone from, I can help you with the content, but what you just said is completely like a foreign language to me. And so I think it's really about messaging and sharing with parents how to do this. Tim Forker, who is from Williamsville Public Schools, the superintendent there, he did the same thing. A lot of parents pushed back against this, and they said, I had a textbook when I went to school, and I'm a doctor now, and I did just fine. So make sure my kid gets a textbook, because if they don't, they're not going to be a doctor like me. And Harvard wants a textbook, and Princeton wants a textbook. But the thing is that the higher ed level is changing too. There's a good chance that kids are going to be exposed to open educational resources, or resources that are curated and built by a team of faculty members when they get to college. It's happening at not just community colleges, but major universities. The University of Minnesota has a whole department of open education. It's run by Dave Ernst. And you know, it's because colleges realize that they need to support better equity and access around that. So I think just messaging to parents, explaining it what it is. Tim, actually, all the courses that are built within Williamsfield are actually shared with parents, so parents can actually access the courses because they're online. You can see all the materials that their sons and daughters are working on. You know, and it's worked great. It's just kind of getting out in front of the messaging, and just you know, like we do with anything in our schools, is just leading with transparency around that.
Great, thank you. All right, any other questions?
Okay. Thank you, Andrew, so much. We really, really appreciate you taking time out of the day to visit with us.
And I'm going to share, actually, I want to share one resource here with you that I'm very proud of. It was helped put it together, and I'm just going to do a quick screen share here, because this is something I like, you know, everyone to walk away with. Let me just see. Okay. You see that?
It's almost.
Oh, there it is.
Okay. So I'll actually take you out here a little bit, take you back just to show you the breadcrumbs of how to get to this. So the Office of Educational Technology, I really like our website. We're one of the few departments in the Department of Education that has a really cool website. Other departments, other agencies have come to us and say, can you build our website to look like yours, because it's really great and chock full of great resources and positive storytelling. So on this website, you can access a bunch of resources. One is our Go Open District Launch Packet, which I mentioned before. So this is both in a digital format and a PDF. So you can access it in multi functions. So the Go Open District Launch Packet, you can actually see the different sections are built right in here. So this is what all of our Go Open districts, like I said before, this was essentially crowdsourced and built by our Go Open districts. This is not government policy. This is not any federal policy, state policy. This is just a resource for districts. And so it basically takes you through how some of our how some of our Go Open districts began to think about entering into open educational resources, how they looked at their infrastructure, how they looked at their professional learning, who was involved, what subjects they used, how they plan to scale up. And so it essentially takes you through, and each section is set up with different tasks and guiding questions. It also has examples from some of our most exciting Go Open districts. It has resources at the end. So this is open. This is free to anyone to use. So also we have one other thing I'll share that is that I actually used before I got to the department is the our story engine. So a lot of what we do is positive storytelling at the department. And so you have our tags over here. So our Go Open districts, we have 12 Go Open stories from districts across the country. And the great thing about this is when you click on one of these, you read their story. They give you the district demographics and snapshot. They have related stories, but it also it has a contact. So you can actually contact these people, and these people know that they're going to be contacted. So it's fine to send a cold email and just say, hey, I learned about you from this guy, Andrew Marcinek, and he told me to contact you and say hello and learn from us. So that's a great way of reaching out, making connections, collaborating. Because as you go through this, even as some of our most advanced Go Open districts are going through this, they constantly have questions coming up because this thing is, again, we're really kind of at the pioneer stage of really driving what's going to be a sustainable mechanism in education for the next several years. So we're building this as it's going, and we're creating a new way of accessing resources. So there's going to be a lot of questions around that. The other thing too, like we have, some of you may have heard of the National Educational Technology Plan. That is here as well as our Future Ready resources. So the great thing about all of these, let me just put this down here. The great thing about all of these resources is that they're all public domain, which means that if you're building a strategy around technology, or you're building a strategy around a strategic plan around open educational resources, you can literally copy and paste what we've shared and bring it into your strategic plan and use it and call it yours. Now, you can't go sell that on Amazon or somewhere else. Don't do that, because that's infringing upon the great sharing community. But what that means is you can share that resource, and you can continue to make iterations on it and make it better. So we offer all those resources for districts across the country. Anyone can use them, access them, and remix and reuse them. So please access those resources. If you have any follow-up questions, please get in touch with me. I can kind of make connections with folks in other districts, or make some connections with folks at the department if you'd want to talk to some of the folks down there. If you're interested in becoming a Go Open district, please let us know. Well, I'm not there anymore, so I can't really do anything there, but I'm not used to saying that yet. But yeah, it's a great opportunity. And the one benefit that I think has come out of this since we launched it back in October is that we really changed the language and the thinking around how people are talking about open educational resources. We're changing the dialogue. We're changing the conversations. We were just at ISTE. The department went to ISTE. And one of the things that my boss, Joseph South, said when he asked a group of about 500 people in an auditorium, like if they knew about open educational resources and they knew about Go Open, almost everyone raised their hand. So this is more of a, it's not a campaign based on quantitative data at this point. It's more qualitative, but we hope to change that. And then one other thing to look out for, I promise I'll stop after this, but I get excited when I talk about this. One of the things we did before I left was the NSF had a research convening specifically around open educational resources in K-12. It went really well. They'll most likely be having one again next year. And essentially what this was a 2-day workshop where that brought together district teachers, district leaders, nonprofit OER advocates, and researchers from universities around the country. And essentially the goal of the 2 days was to find ways in which we can begin to develop really good research questions and begin to fund research. Well, not us, but the like NSF and Hewlett and other foundations to fund research based on what's needed in K-12 OER to really make this work and really to add more proof points to this idea. So that's hopefully going to happen again next year. But it was a really good event, and just keep on the lookout for that.
Awesome.
Right.
Excited.
Yeah.
All
Thank you
right.
so much.
Yeah, thank you again, Andrew.
That was great.
Great. No worries. Nice meeting you all virtually.
Yeah, you too.
Take
Bye.
care.